Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Easter to everyone. Well, Egypt was the first in the whole world to celebrate Shem Nassim, or the Easter, and it started celebrating it years ago, thousands of years ago, since ancient Egyptians. Concerning the traditions of Shem Nassim, which the Egyptians are still abiding by until nowadays, we have the pleasure to host this morning in the breakfast show our dear guest, Mr. Ihab Kamel, historian and researcher. Good morning, Mr. Kamel.
Good morning.
Well, Mr. Kamel, as I've just said, that Egyptians was the first to celebrate the Feast of Spring, which is the Shem Nassim.
Yes, this is absolutely correct, because they had celebrated the Spring Festival or the Spring Feast as early as the Third Dynasty, around 2700 years BC.
Yes.
Also, we have documents that shows that this celebration took place in Heliopolis, especially that the ancient Egyptians had always celebrated the arrival of spring.
Yes.
As the Egyptian year was only divided into three seasons,
Shumu,
Feret, and Akhit, exactly.
Yes.
So the Shumu, that was the spring festival, and that was celebrated in the ancient times, and it started in Heliopolis, and it was celebrated by the public by eating the eggs or putting the eggs outside the houses in small trays that were made out of palm leaves. Why the egg? Because the egg in ancient Egypt, it's the symbol of resurrection. So they considered that festival is the festival of resurrection, the resurrection of life. And that's why it was called Shumu. Shumu, it means resurrection. Yes. In ancient times. And it continued during the different historical periods until nowadays, and it became the most ancient public holiday or public celebration.
Yes, that the whole Egyptians
exactly,
yes,
regardless what their religions are, they celebrate it, exactly.
Yes. So, Mr. Kamel, there was special traditions since the ancient Egyptians started celebrating the Easter or Shem Nassim since 3,000 years ago, or actually 2,700 years ago. So the Egyptians are still keen on these traditions. As you've just mentioned, there are some meals that the Egyptians always eat in this day, like the eggs, as you've just mentioned, also the onion, and also the salted fish. Could you give us an idea about this?
Well, the ancient Egyptians had eaten salted fish thousands of years ago, and not only salted fish, they had salted many different kinds of meat in order to preserve them. But of course, again, the salted fish, and fish in particular, because fish was also one of the symbols of resurrection in the ancient times. The onions, they considered the onions, it repels the demons, and it makes their year prosperous, and they feel that they start their year by being protected from the demons and the evil spirits. That's the reason why. Which up till nowadays, the Egyptians, they still kept the tradition. As I said, they kept the tradition as it was. Even the name today, it's even driven from the ancient name, Shumu, which was later changed to Shum in the Coptic period.
Yes.
So you will notice that most of the celebration, or most of the ways of celebration, are still the same and unchanged.
Yes, we have a picture now showing drawings by ancient Egyptians, also showing the celebrating Shem Nassim.
Well, as you
things they used to eat and the way they were dressed.
The traditional food, yes. The procession that took place, because they also, every town celebrated this festival with a religious touch by carrying the model boat that contains the statue of their deity. Also, all the Egyptians, they used to go out to enjoy the open air and enjoy the fields and the gardens. And the scene that we had just seen, it was showing a table, a very rich table of a rich nobleman that includes eating fish or salted fish. And that's, by the way, very rare.
Yes.
Because in ancient Egypt, fish was not a holy food, but in this festival it was.
Yes.
That is why you will find that we have it on the offering table. Of course, when you look at the scenes over here, you will see that this scene, it shows the celebration in a religious way. Over here, it shows the celebration of the public. Although it belongs to a nobleman, but still he's celebrating like the public by going hunting in the marshes of the delta, and you can see that he is surrounded by the papyrus marshes, and you can see how he's catching different types of fowls and hunting for different types of animals over here.
Yes. So celebrating Easter now in Egypt nowadays, also the Egyptians until now are very keen on, this. They made something like preserving this culture for thousands of years.
It's not the only thing that the Egyptians preserve up till now. They had preserved
also the culture in Ramadan. Traditions in many
in many
occasions.
ways.
In many
Egyptians,
occasions. What does this show of the character of the Egyptians?
Simply authenticity, and it shows that this country has very long roots
And values.
and it can absorb any newcomer. When you look at the heritage, you'll find that it's a very profound heritage that goes down that goes back for thousands of years, and it's very hard to change. And that's the way with all great civilizations. And these celebrations are a witness that the ancient Egyptians are so proud of their roots and that their civilizations lives under their skin.
Yes.
For example, the Arabic we speak, it has more than 70,000 ancient Egyptian words.
Yes.
Which makes the Egyptian Arabic or the Egyptian dialect in Arabic very special, because we're surrounded by 22 countries that speaks Arabic. But our Arabic is different because of our ancestors. We inherited so many words from them. The language is still alive. Our celebrations.
Yes.
Even celebrating some traditions like the birth of children and some of the habits that the Egyptians still practice up till now. Lots of them, they relate back to the ancient Egyptian times. So I can't say that this is something that would make me surprised. No, this is something that many historians had written about, and this is part of the character of the Egyptians.
Yes. So there were some places that Egyptians visit or go out during this day, the Easter day. The gardens and...
The gardens and the open areas, this is also something they inherited, because they didn't only inherit the festival, but they inherited also the same concept.
Yes, of celebrating this occasion.
Exactly, and the same concept of the festival from their ancestors. Yes. So they still celebrate the same way, because it's still the same concept. If you have the same concept, you will have the same practices.
Yes, yes. Were there any costumes that ancient Egyptians used to wear during this festival?
Usually the ancient
Egyptians
used to wear their best clothes.
Yes.
In this festival, regardless the colors, we don't know much, because the clothing that we found dating back to the ancient times, it was mostly from linen, and linen usually had very little dyeing.
Yes.
But we understand that the ancient Egyptians used to wear their best clothing.
Yes, yes. So concerning family gatherings during this day, it's nowadays also the Egyptians are keen to gather, the family gathers on this occasion. Was this something that we inherited since our ancestors or ancient Egyptians?
The Egyptians are very family orientated, and since the ancient times. And when we look at some of the artifacts that were found related to the ancient Egyptians, or some of the scenes, and I'm talking about the main scenes of the tombs of some of the nobles that dates back as early as the Old Kingdom, you would find that the owner of the tomb with his wife and his children are also represented in front of the offering table, which is an indication that the ancient Egyptians were very family orientated. It's the same thing, I believe, that the Egyptians are very family orientated. They had inherited this from their ancestors, and this shows and it's reflected on their history. You'll find that the Egyptians by nature, they're not an immigrating people, not like the Phoenicians, for example, or are our closest neighbors. Our close neighbors, the Phoenicians, they were living in Tyre in Lebanon, and suddenly they decided that it was becoming too crowded, so they decided to move to Carthage in Tunisia. The Egyptians don't do that. The Egyptians like to have the family ties. Even if the place becoming too crowded, still they can live together and find a way to live together. And you can find this even in the modern culture nowadays.
Yes. Sir, why is celebrating Easter in Egypt different from any other country? And what are the countries that you feel that it's celebrates it similarly, resembles Egypt?
All the Orthodox countries.
Yes.
You're talking about Greece, you're talking about Russia, you're talking about Serbia, some big parts of Bulgaria, all the countries that believes or adopts the Orthodox faith. The ancient Egyptians or the early Christians, when they had looked at the Easter, the description of the Easter in the Bible, they had started recalculating the dates, and they had discovered that their calendar is much more accurate. So they were going to use their own calendar, while in Europe they were using a different calendar, a solar calendar or a Julianic calendar.
Yes.
So what was the description? The description that it was a Sunday, the full moon on the day of spring. Day of spring, it means the day when night hours are equal to the day. So the mathematician Sosthenes, he started tracing back these phenomena back in time, and he discovered that the date the Europeans celebrate Easter does not match.
Yes.
But when he followed the ancient Egyptian calendar, which the Egyptians had used, he found that these phenomena only match with the day before the celebration of the Shum, or the before or in the same day when it turned to spring. So actually they had to change the date of celebration by few days, and in order that the two festivals wouldn't be celebrated in the same day, they made the Shum festival would be after the celebration of the Easter, because the celebration of the Easter should not be mixed up with any other feast or any other festival. So it became the Monday after Easter.
Yes, yes. So this is a national holiday in Egypt, and actually it's one of the, it's the most famous feast in Egypt, and it shows the face of Egypt. Are there some of foreigners who would like to spend the Easter here in Egypt?
Easter is a holiday season in Europe.
Yes.
Generally speaking.
But the weather in Egypt is completely different than Europe.
Completely different.
Yes.
I mean, up to now,
But
there are lots of European countries that still have snow.
Yes.
And rain
Yes.
and very low temperature, yes. And that is why it's always, we have two big seasons for the
Yes.
travelers who comes to Egypt. We have Christmas, because that's a big holiday, and Easter, because that's the second biggest holiday they have, which lasts for about 10 or 11 days. So that would be a good chance for them to come to Egypt and celebrate their Easter.
Yes, yes. How do you see this occasion, the Easter, as a symbol of unity between Muslims and Christians here in Egypt? Both celebrate this feast.
Well, because of the existence of Shamanism,
Yes.
that's a celebration which all the Egyptians celebrate, regardless their religions, and especially it comes the second day after Easter. So it's an excellent opportunity for everybody to celebrate together. And this year it's coming in Ramadan, so you'll find Muslims and Christians,
Yes.
they're congratulating each other for Ramadan and for Easter. One is telling you happy Ramadan, the other one's telling him Christos Anesti.
Yes.
And that's the way it keeps going. And this only happens here.
Yes, yes. So 2 years ago, the corona started here in Egypt, as the whole world, of course, was suffering from it. So the Egyptians celebrated Easter in a very different way and abided by the restrictions by the state. Could you give us your insight concerning this?
Well, the COVID crisis, it was not an easy crisis. It
Yes.
was global and it was serious, and the government had taken extreme measures. Still, the Egyptians had to commit to the restrictions that were made by the government, which is something we should respect. But still, this could not prevent them from celebrating Shamanism. Maybe because it's the COVID made them feel that things were restricted, but this wasn't. But this festival was a golden opportunity to celebrate regardless,
Yes.
regardless what was happening. And
Yes.
actually, the Egyptians, they love to celebrate
Yes,
by
of course.
nature.
I thank you very much, sir, for joining us today. Thank you so much, Mr. Ihab Kamel, historian and researcher.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me in this segment. Happy Easter. I leave you with the rest of the segments of The Breakfast Show.